You have cancer. 3 words that change a life forever. We would like to offer another 3 words. Be an overcomer. Welcome to the 1% Podcast, where our conversations with other cancer warriors, survivors, and caregivers allows us to give you that extra boost you need to face your challenge head on, live life from a new perspective, and forge a path that keeps you moving free and clear. Now, welcome your host and cancer survivor, Truett Taylor.
Welcome to today's episode of the 1% Podcast, the show where we interview young adults who are battling or surviving an unexpected cancer diagnosis. You are not alone, and I promise, by consuming today's content, your soul will be fed with the hope, courage, and inspiration you need to keep fighting for today. I'm excited to be on your journey with you today. If you haven't done so already, be sure to head over to 1percentpodcast.com to sign up for our email list to see the latest news and updates for all our guests on the show. You can also check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1% Podcast. If you want to join in on some of our discussions, please join our Facebook group, the 1% Podcast. To contact me directly for content, questions, or booking events, you can email me at info@1percentpodcast.com. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 60 of the 1% Podcast. I know what you're thinking. You have missed the show coming out. We took a small summer hiatus, but we are back and ready to rock with so many people that I've had a chance to interview over the past couple of months that you guys haven't even heard yet. So, man, the past couple of months have been absolutely crazy here in Atlanta. We had an opportunity to travel around and do a bunch of things that we wanted to do for the summertime. I had a chance to speak at the Suicide Prevention Summit in Aiken, South Carolina a couple of weeks ago, and it was absolutely amazing to share my story with so many people. The suicide rates continue to rise in the U.S. and across the world, and especially in the cancer community as well. And I really talked a lot about the disease of despair, which I think a lot of people have, that there's just no hope for them and certain situations in their life. I'll be putting that talk out really soon as well, too, so you guys be on the lookout for that. And then just a week or so later, I had a chance to go to the Colorectal Cancer Alliance conference in Boston, and I absolutely love Boston. The weather was perfect. When we left Atlanta, it was 95 degrees, and it's still in the 90s right now. But when we arrived in Boston, it was a cool 65 degrees. Felt absolutely amazing. I have several friends in Boston that I had a chance to connect with. Man, we had a great time. The Colorectal Cancer Alliance really puts on a phenomenal conference. Had a chance to meet so many new people and hear about all the new advancements in tumor markers, how people to share their story, the advocacy groups. There's just such a great love from that, and I'm so thankful to be a part of that. Man, we have a tremendous amount of guests. I have tons of interviews that I have just stockpiled to share with you guys, but we're going to make a little shift in the podcast coming up over the next month or so. I really want to focus on the mental health side of cancer because I feel like that everyone has a voice, and your voice and your own advocacy are a part of your healing process. And I feel like there's really no blueprint after you receive a cancer diagnosis from the mental health side. The doctors and the pharmacists and all the practitioners really focus on the medical side, but who is there to really focus on the mental health side? If you're like me, you go through the grief cycle and you went through all these up and down emotions, but sometimes you can get stuck in certain spots, and really hearing how people got through those tough moments, I think is going to just add a ton of impact to you and a ton of help to where you're at in your journey. And no matter what you're experiencing in life, life has ups and downs and all these different things that we go through with. And it's always good for someone to be able to teach you or remind you how to overcome a situation. So the podcast is going to shift a little bit towards that direction coming up soon. We've always kind of had that as an undertone, but I'm really excited to focus more on that side of everything. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from people, and that seems to be what people really enjoy the most. People want that community. They want that sense of belonging, because sometimes we can, get confused with how we feel and what we want to do and what we want to say, and is this okay? And it's great to hear other people going through that process, and especially to hear how they've been able to overcome that. So we all teach each other, and I'm so excited to be able to bring you guys that in the next couple episodes. Now, in today's episode, I had an opportunity to interview Miss Gina Hollenbeck. And man, if you've ever met Gina or if you know Gina, like you have an absolute treat just to know her, just to be in her presence. She is so full of life and full of energy and full of hope. And Gina's story is crazy, and it's exciting to hear her really tell her story and really to go through the process, because Gina has a quote during our interview, and I want to just let you guys know about it ahead of time because I want you to listen for it. She tells a story about how when you look outside, you can either see the mud or the stars. So basically, you can either see the good things in life or just focus on the bad things. And if you've ever had cancer, or if you know someone that's had cancer, it's really easy to focus on the negative things, how bad you feel, what's the prognosis going to be? Is my treatment going to stop working? It's really easy to focus on the negative things. And we've all had those moments where we get scared, but we also really need to remind ourselves that we need to focus on the stars as well too, not just the mud. And Gina does a great job of explaining that in our interview today. And I'm so thankful that I had the chance to meet her. I actually went to the ALK Positive Lung Cancer Conference they had several months back, and I was blown away by her presence, the people that spoke there. One of our future guests, Amanda, is going to be on the show pretty soon as well too. And guys, the love in that room, it was just so amazing, and I'm so thankful just to know Gina, to hear her story. And I'm thankful for you guys to get to have the opportunity to hear her story as well too. So without further ado, you guys welcome Miss Gina Hollenbeck to the show, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, Gina. Welcome to the 1% Podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, Truett.
I'm so excited to have you on the show here. We have a mutual friend in common, a guy who had sent me an email about you, and along with it was attached a YouTube video. And wow, I just was completely blown away by your story, the way you tell your story and how rich and powerful your story is, and just your attitude, your mindset, your faith, all of those things like that come from just me watching that video. I knew I absolutely had to talk to you. I had to have you on the show because I thought your story would dramatically impact so many of our listeners. So I'm so excited to speak with you today and be able to share your story with everyone. Why don't we talk a little bit about who you are, and like maybe introduce you to everyone, and have you tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name is Gina Hollenbeck. At 38 years old, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. I'm a mom of 2 young boys, and I have an amazing husband. And let's see, I'm a nurse. So there's a little bit about me.
Gotcha. What type of nurse are you?
Well, I primarily focus on labor and delivery.
Gotcha. My sister's a labor and delivery nurse, and she said that's the best and the sometimes the craziest area of study as far as nursing goes. You see all sorts of things you want to see, and then maybe things that you don't want to see. So.
Exactly.
So you're such a great storyteller. Tell me, why do you feel like it's important for you to share your story with everyone?
I really hope that my story will bring hope to other people, and that's why I think it's so important.
Well, it definitely did to me the first time I heard it. So, all right, so let's dig into your life a little bit. So tell us about who Gina was prior to her cancer diagnosis.
Okay, Gina was working 2 jobs. I was working at a surgery center, and I was also the clinical director of a nonprofit. So I was running 2 clinics that helped indigent patients and helped girls who had unplanned pregnancies. So I was running 2 clinics there, and I was working at a surgery center. I was also in the prime of my physical health. I was training for a triathlon, doing half marathons, working out every day. I did these crazy boot camps where we threw tires and ran hills and all kinds of crazy stuff like that, and did burpees like every day. But so I was at the peak of my health. I was also competing in tennis, so playing competitive tennis. And so I was just kind of very busy. I'll say I was very, very busy, but doing really well. So, and I wouldn't have ever thought in a million years that I would get diagnosed with lung cancer. I was working really, really hard to be a good mom and take care of my two boys. And we had actually just moved here from Germany. I guess we had lived here for about a year or so. We also had a German exchange student who lived with us for a year. And during that time is when I got sick. And anyway, she had to go back home at the end of the year, and I had a cough. And this cough just persisted. And so I went to the doctor, and I went to just my OBGYN, and I was just like, what's going on? And he's like, well, it's around August. I think it's probably seasonal allergies or something like that. And so why don't you just take some Allegra? And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, I should take some Allegra. He's so smart. Why didn't I think of that? And then that didn't work. So I went back, and he's like, well, maybe you should see an ENT. So I went to go see the ENT, and the ENT was like, I think you might have gastric reflux, like, because you're young, you're healthy. At that point, I was 38, and you're running, so I'm not too worried about you. I think it's just gastric reflux. Here, take this medicine, and here's my cell phone number. Call me in a week if it doesn't get better. So I was like, okay, a week. I can wait a week, but I'm starting to get a little bit worried because I have a cough, and my little nurse senses are popping up, and I'm starting to lose weight. And even though probably most of my life I tried to lose weight, I never did. And all of a sudden I wasn't trying, and I was losing weight. So, I kind of started thinking, something going wrong. And so no one really would take me seriously. So I called the doctor again, the ENT, and also my OBGYN. And I was asking to get a chest x-ray because this cough just wouldn't go away. And I was like, I wonder if I have like walking pneumonia or something like that. I really think I need a chest x-ray. So no one would give it to me. Not intentionally, not denying it, but it was just more of like dismissing it, like, nah, she doesn't really need that, she's fine. And I did. I looked fine. I was still competing in tennis and still running and doing all the things that I love to do. And I finally went to my friend who worked at a diagnostic imaging center, and I asked her if she could just do the chest x-ray on me. And she was like, well, do you have a doctor's order? And I was like, no, I don't have a doctor's order. But I was like, can I just pay for it? And she's like, yeah, it's $75 because insurance won't cover it if you don't have a doctor's order. So I just paid for it. And the radiologist who read it was very concerned. And he's like, something's going on in your left lung, and you need to go see a pulmonologist like now. And so I called the pulmonologist, and the pulmonologist just told me that it would take 2 months to get in to see them. And I just kind of thought, oh my gosh, I don't think this can wait 2 months. And so I was complaining to the receptionist, and she was like, ma'am, if you think this is an emergency, you should just go to the emergency room. So that's exactly what I did. I walked into the emergency room with a cough, exactly what they tell you not to come to the emergency room for. And luckily, the ER doc took me very seriously, did a CT scan. Once he did a CT scan, he could tell that something was wrong, but he didn't know what it was. He thought it was either pneumonia or histoplasmosis. And he's like, you've got to do a biopsy to figure out if this is a fungus or a bacteria to treat. So we did a biopsy, and I asked the doctor doing the biopsy, like, do you think this could be cancer? And so I keep asking, like, do you think this is cancer? Because I'm losing weight, and like nothing is really adding up. And they were like, oh no, definitely, you look good. When I looked at it on the scope, it doesn't look like cancer. And so I just kind of thought, I don't know what it is, but I kept getting sicker and sicker, and I was getting to the point where when every time I laughed, it made me cough. And anytime I would, have a sentence at the end of the sentence, I couldn't finish the sentence because I was so out of breath. And so I knew that something was going on, and I kept losing weight. And at this time, it was around October, the end of October. We always my family has this huge Halloween party. And it's like a big party. Everybody dresses up. You're totally not cool if you don't come to if you come to our Halloween party without a costume on. So it's a big deal. And I was so excited about this Halloween party. Well, the costume that I like, this is kind of a big deal for me. Like I'd make a Halloween costume, but my costume didn't fit anymore. Like I had lost so much weight that it was like swallowing me. And I had to run out to the store, like 2 days before our Halloween party and go get a new costume because I had lost so much weight. And so anyway, I finally, like, we're waiting for the results. All my friends are calling me like, Gina, did you get, your results? Do you know what's going on? And the pulmonologist called me on the phone on a Tuesday night. Our party was on a Friday night, I think. It was, Friday night. And he told me that my biopsy showed that I had tumor cells. And I said, wait, tumor cells? Do you mean I have cancer? Like I asked like 3 times before, do I have cancer? And he said, yeah, you do. You have cancer. And I want you to go talk to an oncologist tomorrow. They're going to call you in about 5 minutes, and they'll take you from there. And so my oncologist nurse called me right afterwards, and I was like, okay. And she's like, well, we don't know the stage or anything like that yet, so we'll find that out soon. But we want you to come on in and see the oncologist tomorrow. So the next day was a Wednesday, and I went to go see the oncologist, and I think that was probably like one of the worst days of my life. The reality of all of it just hit me. We were sitting in this dark room and looking at all of the x-rays. They were like all around me, like on these big screens. And my oncologist, his name is Dr. Raymond Osaragigiban. We just call him Dr. O for short because it's so big. But he kind of showed me and pointed out what was going on. And, I understood because I was a nurse. And he asked me at that point, he said, this cancer really likes to go to the brain. So if you have time today, I'd really like you to go downstairs and get an MRI. And I said, yeah, I have time, of course. So I went downstairs to go get the MRI. And while I was waiting to get in, I just all of a sudden threw up. And it was just like, I think it was just this stress and the severity of everything like hit me like, oh my gosh, how can I have cancer? I have 2 little boys that I have to take care of, and I have a whole life ahead of me. I just started, and I had been teaching Sunday school, and I've taught Sunday school since I was about 16 years old, and even though I don't consider myself very religious, I feel like I'm very spiritual, and I taught this Sunday school the Sunday before this. I had just taught the kids the verse, Joshua 1:9, be strong and courageous and do not be afraid. The Lord your God goes with you wherever you are. So, but I just taught the kids, be strong and courageous and do not be afraid. And I taught it to them with superhero motion. And so that verse just came to me as I was sitting there. Okay, Gina, be strong and courageous and do not be afraid. And it's hard to not be afraid, like very hard to not be afraid when you just found out that you have cancer, and how the severity of it. The cancer was everywhere. It was all over my left lobe, all over my lymph nodes in my what they call your mediastinum, which is the middle of your chest. And it was encasing my trachea. So that's why it was difficult for me to talk and things like that, because it was wrapped around my trachea and closing it. And so it just was so hard to take in all of that. So we waited on the MRI results, and the hour before our party, we decided not to tell anybody about the cancer. And it was just because of our Halloween party, because I was thinking, oh gosh, like this could be severe. And if, this is my last Halloween, I don't want this party to be all about people and my cancer. I want them to be having fun and having a good time. And I don't want this to be about me and cancer. And so we decided not to tell anybody. And so my husband was playing in band. He's like the lead singer of the band, and they like played these amazing songs and like all kind of like were inspirational and had to do with me fighting cancer and things like that. And none of our friends knew that, that's what it's about, or that's why, the songs were emotional or anything like that. But anyway, we got the results of the MRI about an hour before the party, and it showed that I had a large tumor in my brain. So the lung cancer had metastasized to my brain. So this meant that it was stage 4 lung cancer. And stage 4 lung cancer back in 2015 only had about a 2% survival rate past 5 years. And so the chances of me dying were pretty great. And it was about a 98% chance of me dying within 5 years. And so I went to MD Anderson. Fast forward, we didn't tell anybody at the party. I finally told people the day after Halloween, and telling people was probably one of the hardest parts of my entire cancer journey, because it was so hard bringing pain to other people, and they would visibly be in pain or on the phone, hearing the fear in their voice when they found out that I had stage 4 lung cancer. It was awful.
So let's talk about
I think that was probably very hard.
Yeah. So just to kind of back up for a couple of seconds, you told us so much information, which is, wow, that's a lot to take in. And I'm sure at that party, it was super hard to not tell everyone, because for me, and you tell me if this was in your mindset, as you're looking at everyone, are you thinking to yourself, this could be the last time I see these people?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking for every single person. And it felt like I just wanted to hug every single person I saw, because I thought it might be the last time.
Yeah. So going from completely healthy to not being healthy super fast is a very difficult change, especially when you're so intentional about, all the tennis and the running and the burpees and everything else. If you're doing burpees, you're definitely super intentional, because those are the worst thing that I think physically people can do. But if you're being that intentional on your workouts and your body and your health, and you're managing and you're running these 2 clinics, you've got a full life going on, and then all of a sudden, your priorities completely change, and something that you pretty much have no control over has control over certain parts of your body. That's a huge adjustment in a lot of ways for us that, really go out and try to attack life and be intentional about being successful, whether it's in our health or our occupations or our family. So I love to ask this question to people when we're talking, like, everybody responds differently to going from being healthy to being sick. For people out there listening right now that have experienced that moment, tell us how you felt when everything all of a sudden became a reality to you. Like, wow, this is a lot worse than I thought it was going to be. And, now I'm no longer, a healthy person like I thought I was. I'm a person that's really going to have a strong fight ahead of me. Tell us about that transition and how you've been able to deal with that.
I think that, I don't know. I think maybe I didn't transition. I didn't think like I'm going to be sick. I just always felt like I was healthy. I just had a minor, a temporary setback. So I never really felt like, my whole life was changing, and I didn't feel like that. I remember one time a neighbor asked me, she's like, "How are you really feeling, Gina?" And I said, "I'm absolutely exhausted." And she said, "Well, then do you have time to take naps?" And I said, "No, I'm absolutely exhausted. It's not an option. I just do. I have to just take a nap. It's not optional. If it was optional, I would be up and doing things." And so I think that maybe I didn't even ever allow myself to say, hey, I've got a long journey ahead of me. So at that point I hadn't really realized that.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought I'm gonna go fight this and I'm gonna get better. That's all I ever thought about at that moment. And I was pretty determined that I was stage 4 lung cancer is not curable right now. And I was pretty determined that I was going to be the first one. And so, and I knew I was going to be the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I didn't realize that it was a long journey until I was completely healed of cancer, no cancer. I went through brain surgery, lung surgery, chemotherapy, and I thought I was going to stay that way for 5 years. So I remember at the end of my last surgery, I was like, okay, here the clock's ticking. So
Right.
this is day 1, and I was like, I'm getting to 5 years. Heck yeah. And I felt amazing. I felt really good and I felt optimistic. So I guess it was maybe 3 months later when I got my scans and it showed that cancer had come back. I was devastated, absolutely devastated. And not because I was afraid of God's plan, but I thought, oh my gosh, the clock that was my first thought, is the clock's going to start over again. Now I lost 3 months. But then finally the realization of that this is not a curable disease. I have a long journey ahead of me, and how I fight it is so important to the outcome. And so that was a time when God and I had to really sit down together and talk. And I had to go over, what do I think and what do I believe? And maybe I'm not going to die in 10 months like the doctor at MD Anderson told me. Maybe I am going to die in 4 years or 5 years. But the truth is, none of us knows when we're going to die. We're all in the same boat. Any of us can walk out the door right now and be hit by a car. And so I thought, I'm not, just because I have a so-called terminal illness, it doesn't make me any different than anyone else. So how am I going to live? And I remember having a talk with God and saying, God, is heaven real? And I remember very clearly just feeling this warmth and peace just come over me. It felt like a blanket out of the dryer. And I was apologizing and telling God, I'm so sorry for all the stupid things I do, because I do. I mean, we're all sinners. And I just remember apologizing and saying, God, I'm so sorry for some of these stupid things that I did. And I just very clearly felt that God was telling me, it's already been done. Gina, you know who you are and you know whose you are. And I didn't have anything else to worry about. And then I knew that heaven was real. The next day, my friend Cassie came over just unexpectedly out of the blue. And she said, I know this sounds weird, but God told me to take you out to coffee. So we went out to Starbucks and we start talking. And Cassie actually died giving birth to her 6th child. And during that near-death experience, she actually saw heaven. So at that coffee appointment at Starbucks, she told me all about heaven and exactly what she saw and what it was like. And that was my reassurance. And God, through Cassie, God told me exactly what heaven was going to be like, and for me not to worry. I had no idea she was coming. And so God has given me these little, we call them God winks. My friend Miss Linda and I call them God winks. But anyway, God has given me those little things throughout my journey just to let me know that He is real, heaven is real, and He gave me 2 very important truths to get me through the whole entire journey. And that this, that God loves me even more than he loves myself. God loves me even more than I love myself.
Mm-hmm.
And his plan for me is better than my plan for me.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up. I talk about faith a lot with people. Some people have faith, some people don't. And I think all of us that have experienced cancer at some point in time, we treat it like everything else. We kind of dial it back. Okay, what did I do wrong? You feel like a part of you is like, did I deserve this? You ask yourself those questions. Did I do something wrong? Did I, some people say, am I being punished for something that I did in the past? Or did I not have enough faith? Or we all kind of like try to rationalize it a little bit at first. And you brought up something like, is heaven real? And that's a question I think is so important. And which is such a wonderful, transparent thing that you said, because some people feel like that do have faith, and in the faith community that you should never question anything, right? Because you just automatically believe, and that's the way it is, and not talk about it, don't question it. But realistically, that's not always the case. Like we can't understand everything that happens and why it happens and when it happens and who it happens to. And I think it's wonderful to be able to question that. And even the act of questioning it definitely, it brings you closer in your relationship to God. And I think that's something that throughout what you're going through now is definitely the backbone of, your peace and your joy, and not your happiness, because happiness comes and goes with good moments and bad moments, but joy is in your spirit. And if your spirit isn't connected, like it's really hard to have that joy that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. And that's a very hard thing to explain to someone who maybe doesn't have faith, but on this side or the next, like you're going to be okay. You're loved way more than you love yourself. Like you mentioned, just the grace and the mercy that you have to still be here, to enjoy your family. Like every day there's something to be grateful for. And as you continue to look for that, and each day you always find what you're looking for. If you're looking for, a reason to be upset and mad and disappointed, you're going to find that, just the way you're looking for gratitude and positivity and grace and love. You're going to find that every day as well too. And when you look through life through those lenses, you tend to enjoy life a lot more. And I already know the answer to this question I'm about to ask you, but, would you say your life has been more fulfilling in a way since you've had this near-death experience in your life?
Oh, absolutely. I think that I would not wish cancer on anyone in the world, but I also would not trade it for the world. It was for me like a reset button. So it was an opportunity to stop and reevaluate everything in my life and everything I believed and how I behaved. And it just changed everything. It opened my eyes to seeing the things that are important and the things that are not. And the truth is, I am not afraid to die. But now I want to live more than ever. And not only do I want to live more than ever, I want to see everything and do everything, and every little thing, like the sunsets are just more apparent to me, and the flowers and the trees. And I'm just more aware of all the miracles happening around me every day.
I love that. So, going through a illness like this, it definitely puts some stress, and it changes the mindset of family and relationships. What would you say has been the biggest challenge in your husband's relationship, or you and your kids' relationship, since you found out you were diagnosed with lung cancer?
My oldest son was in the 6th grade when I was diagnosed, and one of my first surgeries was a brain surgery. So it was, they opened my skull, and my son actually went to middle school that day, and all of the kids in his youth group were praying at each bell for me during surgery. But my son wasn't. My son was mad. And so I think that seeing him hurt through this and him question, like, why would God do this? My mom's done everything right. I've tried to do everything right, which is not true, but we think that in our head. And um, I think that was probably the hardest thing, is seeing my son struggle. We did get a family therapist, which is something that I would recommend to anybody who has children and who is going through cancer. And she gave him some really amazing ways to have some control over this disease. He doesn't have any control over what happens to me or the progression or anything like that. But she gave him some awesome ideas of how to have control. As far as my husband and I have been, this is so stupid. I can't. The truth is, when I got diagnosed, I knew it was going to be hard. And I knew that physically I was going to change. And I knew that it was going to be emotionally hard. And I told him, look, if you want to divorce me and not do this with me, you don't have to do this with me. And I won't tell anybody, and I'll go live with my mom, and you can, this is your out if you want it. And he looked at me like I had like 3 horns. And he was like, what is wrong with you? I love you so much. And he said, I feel sorry for all your ex-boyfriends who can't do this with you. I'm so glad I get to do this and fight this with you. And, and that eye-opening thing, I mean, it's just, when you talk about marriage and you talk about in sickness and health, like that's what marriage is supposed to be about. And he has just been a pillar of strength in our family, and this sometimes I think sometimes he looks worse, like more like the cancer patient than I do, because of stress. Like you can see it in his face sometimes. And I hate that it has done that to him at certain points, especially like during the brain surgery and stuff like that. He was really stressed. But he's been there just as a pillar of strength through all of it. And he gets to see me on my bad days and on my good days. Look, the truth is I do have a ton of joy, and for the most part I stay very positive, but there are certainly days where I just don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to have cancer, and I don't want to put my family through this, and I wish I didn't have it. And he has to go through those days with me when I'm angry too, and he does, and he's willing to, and he does think about them. So in sickness and health, that is what true love is all about,
Have you guys had, I'm sure you have, and I think it's important for all couples to have this conversation, even if someone's sick or not, but the conversation of what happens if one of us isn't here anymore. Obviously you probably didn't expect to have that conversation as soon as you probably have had it. But when you guys have had that conversation, I think this is really good for people out there listening right now. Again, my wife and I have had this conversation as well too, because you never know. It could be super quick, or it could be, something that happens, way down the road. But I think it's always good to have this conversation. When you guys had that conversation of, what happens next if one of us, passes before the other one, how did that conversation play out with you two? And what are maybe some advice that you have to give to people out there that maybe haven't had that conversation yet?
Well, that's funny. So we were sitting in MD Anderson when we had that conversation, and the doctor had told me, sorry, stage 4 lung cancer is not curable. You've got 10 months to live. Mm-hmm. And so at that time there was all this bombing in Paris, and Greg and I were starting to plan my funeral. So we were and I was like, ugh, gosh, I hate planning thinking about my funeral and what I want it to be like, but I guess we have to do that since you told me I only have 10 months to live. And then I started thinking, and I was like, I really do want you to get remarried when I die. And I want your wife to look like this. And I want her to act like this. And I want to make sure that she, and then he looked at me and he's like, you are so crazy. You're like picking out my next wife. And, we were kind of like laughing about it. But then all of a sudden I was like, I don't really want to do this anymore. I don't want to plan my funeral. I don't want you to get remarried. I want you to be married to me. And I don't feel like doing this anymore. So I don't want to do it anymore. And he goes, yeah, I don't really want to do it either. And I said, look at all those people in Paris, and none of them planned their funeral. And you know what? When you die, you die. I don't think we need to plan anything. And so I said, the truth is, God's in control of every bit of this, and he has our futures in his hands, and he's going to tell us when we have to plan for this. And right now, I don't want to plan for this. I don't feel like it's the right thing to do. So that's how our conversation went. So maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's a thing of denial, but we just feel like, when it's time to plan for our funeral, then God will tell us that.
It's so interesting you say that, and that this kind of goes back to obviously the strength of your faith, because if you're not ready to have that conversation, then it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. You know what I mean? I think that's a good way to look at that. If when God tells you it's time to start that, then maybe that's a different conversation to have and stuff. But, with your energy and with your strength and everything that you have that are fighting the way you are fighting right now, I think, you're definitely on the right track. And lots of times whenever we go through tough situations like cancer or divorce or, some sort of trauma in our life, people watch how you deal with your trauma, especially if you talk about your faith a lot. So going through, the most difficult thing of your entire life, what do you feel like people have seen from the way you've handled this illness compared to maybe, people complain about, oh, I had a terrible day at work and this is the worst, it's the worst food I've ever had at a restaurant. And they get really upset about those things. And, here you are having to deal with stage 4 lung cancer. What do you feel like your life has taught people when it comes down to, I guess, being grateful and just how to deal with certain traumas in life?
I think that people tell me all the time that I'm strong, and I don't see myself as strong. I just see myself as trusting. And I think that's the biggest thing that I think that people, when they get to be around me and get to know me, I think that's what they understand, is that all of this is completely miraculous. I am a walking miracle. I shouldn't be here. I'm not supposed to be here. But God has a plan for me. And I think they see the miracle in that. But the miracle is not that I'm walking around with stage 4 lung cancer and still doing burpees, by the way. That's and being a mom and getting to do all the wonderful things. That's not a miracle. The miracle is that I learned to completely trust God with everything. And so I think that's what people, when they really get to know me, realize that that's the reason I have joy. And that's why I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to die, and I'm not afraid to live. Now I want to live more than ever. And I think they see that because they know that I have complete faith in God's plan for me. And that's not something I've had my whole entire life. And I wish I had. But I completely trust him. And so that was a process for me in a lot of manners. And one of those manners was, you know what? God told me that I'm going to heaven. We figured that out. Jesus and I worked that out, and I'm going to heaven. So I really don't have anything to be afraid of. I know what's going to happen. I'm going to win no matter what, whether I'm healed here on earth or I'm healed in heaven, I'm going to win. And so that part's cool. But then, the doubting part of me said, yeah, you're going to win, but what about your kids? And what about your husband? And what about all the people that you leave behind? That's not fair, and that's not good. And so I had to slowly, it was a slow process, but I had to give my husband and his potential pain and sorrow, and I had to give all that to God too, that God would work through whatever happens to us between now and when I or he dies, that that he's going to be taken care of, that God's going to take care of him. Just like God loves me and has this perfect plan for me, the same is for him. And just like for my sons, God loves both of my sons so much, and he has a perfect plan for them too. So I have to give all that to them. And God tells us again and again, like, don't worry and don't be afraid. And I wasn't created to worry, and I wasn't created for fear. I was created with a purpose, and it's not that. It's to love people and to be a light. And so with that, God told me, like, you got to give all your kids to me and your son to me too. And so I don't have to worry about them when I leave, because they're taken care of too.
Isn't that so? It's a lot of it comes to control, right? We want to control how happy or unhappy, people are, or we want to control what happens. And there's so much stress around being in control of situations that we cannot control, right? There's no way to, tell someone to be happy when there's a sad situation happening. It's just not in our control. And with our own lives too, like when it comes to our relationships or our finances or our occupations, we can only have so much control over that. And I love what you said about really just how hard it is to give up control, because especially if you're super intentional, right? You're like, well, maybe I can make this better. And we can affect some of our lifestyle by the things that we do, but ultimately, we're called to serve. And part of serving is being completely obedient. And it's so hard to really be obedient sometimes when we don't know what the outcome is going to be. And, the fact that you said you got a lot of peace out of really relinquishing, the thoughts of what happens, if I pass away, and with my children and my husband, and you gave that completely over to, it's out of my control, but God, you have control over that. You know what's going to happen. You know what the situation is going to be like when I'm not here. I know what it's like to have that overwhelming sense of joy just to relinquish all that control. And it's not an instant thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm wasn't as great of a Christian as I thought I would be to give that up so fast. But, once you do, it definitely, it's a learning process. And I think that the very fact that you have that kind of faith and transparency with talking about that, again, is a huge thing. And I hope that's something that the people that are listening right now that do share our faith can really think about, what are they still trying to have control over in their life? Here you have a perfectly healthy person in their 30s who doesn't smoke, who exercises, and then, who all of a sudden gets stage 4 lung cancer. Really, what control did you have over that? And it's kind of it makes you evaluate everything else in your life. And, ultimately we don't have control over, things like that happen to us. But, the thing that we do have control over is how we respond to the traumas in life or the circumstances that we have. And with our faith, with our mindset, with the things that we can do physically, we do have choices to make that are healthy with those areas. And that's one thing I love about your story is it can be, you would think, someone in their 30s has cancer and it moves to their brain, and all of a sudden you have a 98% chance of not making it. You have this 2% survival rate that you're working with. How complicated is that, having to navigate a family and kids and your health? And it can be so complicated, but whenever you talk about it, it just seems so simple. And that was one of the things that really attracted me to your story is here you have a very complicated story with a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that, a lot of people that depend on you and that you're connected to, but yet your story is so wonderful because it's all so simple as well too. And the way you tell your story is you tell it from a very, again, I know there's been some pretty crazy low moments and some situations that have happened and a lot of tears throughout this, but you tell it with a sense of joy. And I think that's one thing that I really want the listeners to take away today is you can have the same kind of joy that Gina has when, no matter what the circumstances are. And, I'm so thankful that, again, not that you have cancer, but the way that you're dealing with the situation is so wonderful. If you had to describe maybe, one of your toughest moments, because that's what connects a lot of us lots of times. When things are great, we're all high-fiving and stuff. But when things are the lowest, that's where we tend to isolate ourselves sometimes. And I guarantee there's somebody listening now that's having a low moment. What would you say has been your lowest moment, and how did you overcome that low moment?
So right after I had my upper left lobe of my lung removed, which is, if you know your lungs, you have like two lobes on the left, and that's a big one. So it's 2/3 of your lung. And when I had that removed, I had some chest tubes and stuff like that. But in the recovery process, every single time I breathed, it was painful, really painful, and breathe a lot. So every time I took a breath in, I was hurting, and I can usually endure pain pretty well. I don't like narcotics because they just really make me feel worse. And so I wasn't taking any pain medicine. And I remember praying and like, God, did you forget about me? This hurts so bad. And I think that that was probably like I wound up. It was much darker than the way that I'm describing it, but that's where I was. I really felt like God had forgotten about me because it hurt so bad, and it lasted for so long, and this was for probably 6 weeks of this pain every single time I breathed, and it was exhausting. And anyway, I had to like go look in the mirror and have a talk with God and just say, why, God, why is this happening to me? And why have you forgotten me? And just then, and I'm kind of crying out. And just then my husband comes in and just hugs me and picks me up and puts me back in bed. And I just see the love in his eyes. And then the next thing I know is some neighbors are bringing me flowers. And the next thing I know is my mom comes in and starts brushing my hair. And it's just like, it's the way that God shows you love through his people. And that was the thing that like, I realized, oh my gosh, I am so loved. And thank you, God, for bringing these people and these flowers and, and my husband who loves me so much. And, I think it was just God saying, don't worry, Gina, I'm right here. You just have to open your eyes and see it.
I love that. And you've done so much with all of, your stories since then as well too. Let's talk a little bit about the ALK positive lung cancer group that got started and what it's turned into.
Oh, yeah. Well, so I felt really alone back in 2015 when I got diagnosed. I had never met anybody who was in their 30s with lung cancer and who hadn't smoked. And I felt very alone. So I went to Facebook to look for some people who were like me. And I found a group that was started by another nurse, and her name was Marita. And Marita started this group with her husband, Tom. And there were probably about maybe 100 to 200 people in there, and more people started coming every single day. And there were about 8 of us that popped up, and we were just kind of, I'd say we were go-getters, and we were really passionate about funding lung cancer. We found out that lung cancer is the number one cancer cause of death for men and women, yet it's the least funded. And that seemed really wrong. And we were thinking, well, like, who's going to save us? Who's doing research about this? And what we found is that drug companies are the ones who were doing it. And so I thought, oh my gosh, so I'm gonna have to wait for a drug company to take interest in me to get research for this, because the government doesn't fund any research for this. There's not much going on. So the 8 of us decided that we were going to start fundraising for our own research. So we went to a national patient advocacy lung cancer organization called Longevity, and they took us underneath their wing, and they allowed us to fundraise underneath their 501c3 status. And we raised in a little over a year $600,000 for research for lung cancer. So we, through a scientific process, we chose 3 grants, and we funded 3 researchers to research ALK positive lung cancer. And so it was very exciting. And then some other people, the NIH picked up one of our research projects and completely funded it the rest of the way. So the $200,000 grants that we gave to each one of the research projects just kind of gave them a start, like a push, and then other people picked them up. So that's awesome. So we're getting some amazing research done that is just for our lung cancer. And then in the meantime, we created some bylaws and a structure, and now we have a Facebook page, and we have a website, which is alkpositive.org. You can check us out if you want to. But we all came together, and now our Facebook group has over 1,600 members from 5 continents and 42 countries, and we're all working together to figure out this disease and also caring about each other in the meantime. So it's amazing to have some support.
So the name of your website is alkpositive.org. That's ALKPOSITIVE.org. Said you guys already have 1,600 members in 42 countries, over 5 continents. That's amazing. The work that you've done, the money that you've raised, just the passion behind what you've done. I've talked to other ALK positive patients as well too, and from what I hear, it seems like there's some opportunities with immunotherapy for certain people as well too when it comes down to ALK positive. If you could give us an update on where you are. So you were diagnosed in 2015. It's 2019 right now. So where are you at currently with your cancer journey?
Well, ALK positive lung cancer has 3 targeted therapies, and it basically targets the DNA of our tumors, so it makes the cancer stop growing. Unfortunately, the drugs only last for between 7 to 12 months, and we have 4 drugs, and I'm on the 4th one. I started it back in March. Unfortunately, at that point, cancer came back around my heart, which is called your pericardium, and it came back in my brain. And so when the drug quit working, I got sick really fast, and I got scared, and I thought, oh, I think this might be the time that I'm not going to make it. And I took the new drug, the last and so the 4th of the drugs. I took it, and promise, it was like 3 days. I started feeling better. It was so incredible. This drug, it just melted away the cancer. And so everything in my chest went away. But a new spot showed up in my brain. So I still have that spot in my brain, and we're just kind of watching it right now. And I have PET scans coming up in about a week. So we'll find out what's going on in my chest. But I feel great. I always tell people I look bad on paper, but I really feel awesome. So I keep doing the things that I love to do. And I guess I just, I don't think about the cancer in my brain and the cancer around my heart. And, I keep going. The truth is, I don't know why I feel good, but I do. I feel great. And so I just go with the way that I feel instead of what the scans say.
Wow. I love that. If you could talk about your legacy for a second. So we all leave a legacy behind, no matter, you know, how old we are or anything along those lines. If you think about your legacy in life, the way you live the first, 30 plus years of your life to the way you've lived them the past 4, what kind of legacy do you want to leave for yourself and for the people who know you the most? Like what kind of legacy would you say that you want to leave or you're gonna leave in the future?
Mm. I thought that was I'm sorry if I get distracted, but I think that um, the thing that you said is like how you lived your life in the first 30 years of your life versus how you've lived them, since my cancer diagnosis.
Hmm.
And I think that all of a sudden my eyes were open to so many things, and I would rather have 1 or 2 days like this where I really like know and see what's important,
Hmm.
versus a million days like I was. And I call that living in the mud. Um, Before I was diagnosed with cancer, and it's just because you get bogged down by trying to be the best mom or the best tennis player, or whatever, and you forget to realize like what's truly important. And so I have this thing, and it's all kind of up to you, and you don't have to have faith to have this or anything like that, but the saying is just mud or stars. The choice is yours. So 2 men look through prison bars. One sees mud and one sees stars. And what that means is that we can't ever really control our situations that we're in. So the prisoners are in a prison, and one of them chooses to look at the mud, and the other one chooses to look at the stars. And so we have the opportunity to look at the positive or the negative in every situation. Also, in every person, there's good and bad in every person. And so we have the opportunity to either look at the good or the bad. So I ask my son, I ask my family members, mud or stars, which one is it? And for me, it's stars, baby, all the way.
I love that. That's something I'll never forget. Thank you for sharing that with me and for sharing that with everyone else. Again, you really find what you're looking for, and I love that quote. It's the mode of the stars. The choice is yours. So, Gina, if our listeners want to connect with you, maybe there's some ALK positive patients out there who didn't know that there was a group out there. They can obviously go on Facebook and check out their Facebook group. Do people want to connect with you? What's the best ways? Did it go in through the alkpositive.org website or what?
Yeah, you can go on alkpositive.org. I'm the president of ALK Positive, so my email is president@alkpositive.org. It's really easy to get in touch with me. I'm also on Facebook under Gina Hollenbeck, or you can get in touch with me underneath the ALK Positive Facebook page. You just type in ALK Positive, search that, and we'll come right up.
Wow. Well, Gina, I want to take a second to acknowledge you before we end our interview today. Your story, the way you tell your story is, again, it's what attracted me to wanting to have you on the show. So thank you for taking time this evening to discuss all the information with us and for being transparent and vulnerable. What I want to thank you the most for is your reminder to how we should view life. Throughout our interview today, I'm sure as most people are listening, as we listen to, someone who obviously went through a very difficult situation and who continues to fight and continues to have the type of attitude and the type of faith that you have, it's super inspiring to see your hope. And it's even more inspiring to see, God's grace in your life to enjoy each day at the maximum amount. You just said a second ago that you'd rather have one day on this side than 1,000 days on the other with how you live your life. And I think that's so important. And I love the fact that you are so self-aware that, our life is not our own, and how we live our life is a very big choice that we have to make each day. And the lessons that you're teaching your children and your family and all the people listening today, to really choose the mud or the stars, I think is such a wonderful and positive thing. And, coming for someone who could really see mud in everything, given your diagnosis, and given all the other things that have happened, you choose to see the stars every single time. And for me, I know that's going to dramatically impact my life. That's one thing about the podcast that I do. I get to meet so many amazing people just like you. And, we get to share this message to everyone that's listening. So I'm just so grateful to have an opportunity to speak with you, to share your story. I know for me personally, I'm going to be praying for just a million more days of you seeing the stars over here and really enjoying your life, sharing the love that you have in your heart, and it's experiencing joy in every moment that you have. And I think that's super important for us to all share that with you. So thank you for being a guest on the show. Thank you for all the work that you're doing in the lung cancer community, all the money that you've raised, the organization that you've created, the hope you've given people. Things like that don't come back void. And, in just a short amount of time, you've impacted so many people from all your efforts. And I truly feel like that's part of your life's legacy, is to really be able to impact the type of people that you are. And it takes a wonderful person like you to be able to do things like that. So on behalf of everybody that you've impacted, just want to tell you thank you for what you've done and what you continue to do.
Thanks, True. It's been an honor.
All right. Well, we will follow back up with you. Your episode will actually come out after you get your PET scan results. So I'll be sure to add that in once we get that back, and I'll follow up with you to see how that went. And Gina, we just want to, again, appreciate you being a guest on the show, and we will catch up with you soon, okay?
Sounds good.
We appreciate you spending time with us on today's episode and encourage you to continue the conversation to help you keep pushing forward. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as ways to recommend a guest and connect to Truett personally, head over to 1%podcast.com. Be sure to join us next time for more stories of inspiration right here with Truett Taylor on the 1% Podcast.